In the summer of 1991, the United States Postal Service, USPS, became the backdrop for a tale of revenge that would forever change the life of a bullying full-time mail carrier. The story unfolds against the backdrop of a postal world before the internet, where the flow of mail was an astonishing river of paper and packages. Within this intricate tapestry of postage, a college student found employment as a casual carrier, a temporary postal worker tasked with covering for full-time carriers during their summer vacations. The USPS was a well-oiled machine, governed by stringent rules and regulations. Precise timekeeping was paramount. Carriers were closely monitored and timed during their tasks, with a sophisticated computerized time system in place to ensure efficiency. The institution went to great lengths to scrutinize its employees, employing hidden viewing areas and passive sound monitoring to observe its workers discreetly. Within this system, efficiency was the holy grail. Carriers were expected to complete their routes quickly, with faster carriers receiving the more favorable routes. Slower carriers faced relentless pressure to improve their speed and discipline for any signs of slowness. In those times, the phrase "going postal" was not a mere joke, as the relentless demands of the job sometimes pushed people to their limits. The college student-turned-temp carrier entered this world, hoping to make a living during his summer break. His willingness to work any hours and collaborate amicably with full-time carriers quickly won him favor with the supervisors. His physical prowess, standing at 6 feet 5 inches and blessed with the ability to carry heavy loads, further endeared him to management. In the midst of sorting mountains of mail, the temp carrier was assigned to handle the work of a particularly unpleasant full-time carrier, Dave. Dave, a character reminiscent of a failed gym teacher from the 80s, was notorious for his bullying demeanor. He wore tacky sunglasses, sported a terrible mustache, and held opinions on everything. It soon became apparent that Dave had a specific agenda for the temp carrier: to carry the burden of all the heavy mail. When confronted about this unequal workload, Dave chuckled dismissively, implying that there was no recourse for the temp carrier. Despite registering his complaint with supervisors and the postmaster, the temp carrier was told that as a temporary worker, he had to deal with the situation. The postmaster even advised him to deliver every piece of mail for the route as fast as you can and assured him that he was making significant overtime pay. The seasoned full-time carriers advised the temp carrier not to complete the routes too quickly, as it might reflect poorly on them. In the world of the USPS, solidarity was key. The temp carrier was encouraged to take more time than the full-time carriers, considering his temporary status, inexperience, and the code of camaraderie that bound the carriers together. Fueled by a desire for revenge and armed with an ingenious plan, the temp carrier decided to turn the tables on Dave. He acquired additional mail carrier bags, claiming that they were necessary to carry the heavy items on Dave's route. The postmaster approved this request. This marked the beginning of a calculated game of subterfuge and mischief. Instead of embracing his role as a slow temp worker, the temp carrier meticulously learned Dave's route. He would complete it efficiently, even more so than Dave, but without drawing attention to his swiftness. He jogged and ran through the route, often finishing it in under 3 hours. The initial weeks passed by quietly, with nobody noticing the temp carrier's unassuming efficiency. However, when Dave took a 2-week vacation and the temp carrier managed his route 6 days a week, the unsuspecting bully had no idea of the web that was closing around him. After the first week of accelerated deliveries, the supervisors began to question the temp carrier's methods. They inquired about his timekeeping practices, and he maintained an air of innocence. He revealed that he had been deliberately taking more time to deliver the mail in previous weeks and blamed the budgeted time for Dave's route, suggesting it was allocated for 4.5 hours when it could be completed much faster. The postmaster was intrigued but cautious. The plot thickened, and the temp carrier continued running the route, maintaining his facade. Dave returned from vacation and confronted the temp carrier, unaware of the transformation that had occurred. The temp carrier subtly taunted Dave by suggesting he had learned an invaluable lesson about treating coworkers. This only earned him Dave's mocking laughter and an obscene parting gift. The temp carrier left the USPS as the summer ended, heading back to college. He later learned from his friends at the post office that Dave had been fired just 2 months after the temp carrier's departure. An audit revealed that Dave had been taking unauthorized breaks, engaging in an affair on his route, and generally neglecting his duties. Ironically, the temp carrier had gotten in great shape, both physically and financially, through this act of clandestine revenge. The USPS, with its layers of complexity, was a unique stage for this tale of sweet revenge. The temp carrier's cunning strategy not only exposed the wrongdoing of a bullying colleague but also demonstrated the power of quiet determination. My tale of vengeance begins with a breakup. My girlfriend asked me to move out while she embarked on a work trip, which seemed like a mere end to our relationship. However, the bombshell came when she informed me that she was returning with her new boyfriend. To make matters worse, we were technically still together when she left, and this shocking revelation was akin to a dagger in the heart. But instead of wallowing in despair, I decided to orchestrate a symphony of sweet revenge. A diabolical plan took shape in my mind, one involving miniature, battery-powered noisemakers. These devious little devices were no larger than a quarter but emitted sounds at just the right volume to leave you uncertain if you'd even heard anything. They lasted for ages and were designed to sow the seeds of confusion. I purchased a box of 20 of these cunning gadgets for a mere $100 on eBay. My creativity knew no bounds as I plotted where to plant them throughout her life. I concealed them in her car, strategically positioning some inside light fixtures and wall outlets. I even went so far as to hide a few in a boat her wealthy father had gifted her, for she had grown up sailing. Now, these little troublemakers produced noises at the most unpredictable intervals. They might remain silent for minutes, hours, or even an entire day. The sounds they generated were equally unpredictable, ranging from eerie children's laughter to what we jokingly referred to as a dying breath. There were whistles, scratching noises, and several other perplexing sounds that would leave anyone baffled. As the months went by, I not only found a new place but also managed to rebuild my life. We had mutual friends, and I kept in touch with one of them. They were somewhat bitter about how my ex had terminated our relationship but maintained a loose friendship due to their long history together. One day, we were casually chatting, and this friend mentioned a desire to prank some buddies during an upcoming camping trip. That's why I decided to spill the beans about my little noisemakers. As I shared the story of these ingenious devices, a curious transformation overtook my friend's face. Slowly but surely, a grin spread, and their eyes sparkled with mischief. They asked, "You placed these in my ex's stuff, didn't you?" I confessed, and their laughter erupted into hysterics. Here's where it gets juicy. It turns out my ex's new relationship had been plagued by these mysterious noises for months. Sometimes both of them would hear the sounds, while at other times, only one of them would be tormented. This bizarre auditory phenomenon led them to believe that something was profoundly amiss with their own minds. They were trapped in a bewildering psychological puzzle with no discernible solution. Eventually, the new boyfriend's sanity began to fray, unable to cope with the unexplained sounds that crept into his life. He was convinced that some malevolent force had infected his mind, possibly through a government conspiracy involving brain-controlling worms concealed in vaccines. This ominous belief left him feeling cornered, and he ended the relationship abruptly. For me, the delight was immeasurable. I hadn't anticipated hearing the outcome of my prank, but the news reached my ears, and I reveled in that high for weeks. The icing on the cake? My ex moved out of the house we once shared and informed her parents that she wanted nothing to do with it. She advised them to either hand it over to her brother or sell it promptly. She kept the real reason a well-guarded secret, leaving her family in the dark. When people inquire about my past relationship, I always emphasize that I harbor no grudges. Of course, I conveniently omit the part where I played a wicked mind game on her, pushing it past the point of mere revenge to a state of pure satisfaction. Fast forward to the present day, and my wife knows this story inside out because it's her all-time favorite tale to recount, a chilling saga of sweet revenge that defies expectations.
It all began when my sister-in-law revealed her identity as a trans woman at the tender age of 18. Instead of embracing her during this crucial moment, my in-laws reacted with a shocking and heartless expulsion. They made a cruel decision to kick her out of their house, at a time when she needed their love and support more than ever. The time was 8 p.m., and they left her with nothing, no money, no documents, and even took away her car keys, leaving her stranded and vulnerable. It was an inhumane act. This reprehensible behavior by my in-laws was horrifying on its own, but it didn't stop there. They chose to double down on their cruelty. They adamantly refused to hand over any of her essential documents, leaving her in legal and bureaucratic limbo. We soon realized the extent of their malice when my brother-in-law had to step in, literally barging into their house to retrieve her vital papers. But the torment inflicted upon her by her own family didn't end there. She had diligently saved up $8,000 while working part-time throughout her high school years, a remarkable achievement by any standard. However, my in-laws drained her bank account, leaving her with nothing, and to make matters worse, they sold her car, which was still under their name. It was as if they were on a mission to ruin every aspect of her life. My father-in-law, a small-time businessman, had a pivotal account with a lucrative contract supplying my employer. This contract was something I had helped him secure due to my role within the company. My employer was not just a business, it was a family-like environment where long-term employees were treated as kin. Frustrated by the injustices faced by my sister-in-law, I confided in my boss about the situation. After listening to the plight of my sister-in-law, my compassionate boss presented an extraordinary proposition. He offered a chance to switch to a new supplier if we could find one within a 5% range of the rates offered by my father-in-law. This was an opportunity for my employer to align with our values and loyalty to our coworkers. As I set out on a mission to find an alternative supplier, it was not a typical task for my role, and I had to put in countless extra hours to search for the perfect match. It took 6 long, challenging months of painstaking work to discover a supplier who could meet our criteria and match my father-in-law's rates. But instead of immediately informing my boss, I waited for the most opportune moment. My in-laws had long-standing plans for a major renovation, and the construction work had begun in earnest. I knew this was the perfect time to make the switch without leaving them with any options. The transition to the new supplier commenced the following month, significantly impacting my father-in-law's business. It disrupted his unit economics, and he was forced to scramble to find new customers. The financial toll on his business became overwhelming, leading them to sell their house to rescue the failing company. Unfortunately, the situation had reached a point where they didn't receive a favorable rate for the sale because their house was in disarray, with a significant portion torn down during the renovation. My in-laws had attempted to extract financial support from my brother-in-law, but he stood his ground, telling them to fend for themselves. While my father-in-law's business acumen helped him crawl back from the brink, it was evident that they still hadn't recovered fully even 8 years later, unable to afford a new house. The bitterness over what transpired lingered within their hearts, serving as a grim reminder of their misguided actions. The irony was that, if my in-laws had simply expelled her without the added cruelty, they would likely still have their home today. This dark chapter in our family's history remains a testament to the strength, resilience, and the healing power of time.
As someone who had been with the company for years, I'd seen it all, from its humble, family-owned beginnings to the transformation into a cold, corporate entity. In the early days, our workplace was akin to a friendly neighborhood diner, and our colleagues felt more like friends than mere coworkers. We sported a casual dress code, and life was laid back. But change was on the horizon. It all started when the last family member involved with the business passed away during my 6th year with the company. A new board of directors and CEO swiftly took control, and the corporate tsunami hit us hard. Our familiar, easygoing workplace vanished overnight, replaced by corporate policies that were as rigid as they were absurd. One of the first casualties was our dress code. The transition from casual attire to button-down shirts and dress pants was abrupt, to say the least. Sneakers, those comfortable companions of the tech support team, were banned except for casual Fridays. It was baffling for a group that rarely interacted with customers face-to-face. The new management, including my micromanaging boss, only fueled the growing discontent. A particularly annoying aspect of his management style was his remarkable passivity. He'd make frustrating decisions, and I wouldn't mince words in voicing my concerns. However, once I left his office and returned to my desk, located just 10 feet away, the lack of response gave way to a strongly worded email, highlighting our interaction. Our corporate overlords, who had initially retained the illusion of a family-friendly workplace, displayed their frugality in the most ironic fashion. It was our 10-year anniversary, a significant milestone, and all the top executives descended upon our office. They brought a magnificent cake that bore the company's name and 10 years to make the event special. That's when I hatched a plan. While the cafe sat unguarded, I couldn't resist the temptation. I grabbed a knife from the table, slicing a perfect square from the cake. Like a kid in a candy store, I devoured it with my bare hands, albeit in a hurry to avoid getting caught. I washed off the frosting, leaving no trace of my sweet theft. But what happened next was like a scene from a corporate comedy. The CEO, flanked by his entourage, stormed through the call center, bellowing in anger. The missing slice from the cake was a glaring oversight, and the professional photographer had been set to capture a perfect image of the leadership team with the cake for the local newspaper. Chaos reigned, and accusations flew. I, however, sat in silence, watching it all unfold. The mix of guilt and secret satisfaction coursed through me. For 15 years, I'd kept this story to myself, but now it was time to share. The corporate makeover had its absurdities, and my passive-aggressive acts of defiance were my way of pushing back against the stifling corporate culture. So there you have it, the corporate cake caper, a missing slice that became my silent act of rebellion in a world gone mad.
Around 16 years ago, the narrator was navigating the bustling streets of Los Angeles, a city where finding parking felt like discovering a hidden treasure. Even though they had moved away from California, parking issues remained a hot topic. In this particular story, it's a reminder that even traffic laws and human stubbornness can create moments of entertainment. The tale unfolds one evening when the narrator found themselves driving down a street crammed with parked cars. A familiar sight soon appeared, a massive moving truck, hogging a significant portion of the road. No stranger to this situation, the narrator knew that according to local traffic laws, if the truck occupied their lane, they were legally allowed to proceed around it by using the opposing lane, provided it was clear of oncoming traffic. Just as the narrator was thinking this would be another typical encounter, a compact car decided to go on an adventurous mission to overtake the moving truck. This maneuver placed the compact car on a direct collision course with the narrator's vehicle. Now, in this situation, the narrator could have been the bigger person and braked to let the impatient driver pass safely. But as they say, pettiness sometimes gets the better of us, especially when the law is on your side. So, instead of letting the car pass, the narrator decided to adhere to the rules. They waited patiently, not coming to a halt until their truck's front bumper was almost parallel with the moving truck. It wasn't a high-speed chase. Residential streets were limited to a modest 25 miles per hour speed limit, and it's doubtful that either vehicle was pushing that boundary. Nevertheless, the drama was palpable. Inside the compact car, the driver began to lay on the horn mercilessly. The brightness of the narrator's headlights was blinding, and inside the compact car, the driver was losing their composure. They flailed their arms, raised their voice to a fever pitch, and their face reddened with anger. All the while, the narrator remained unfazed, their truck's high cab preventing the agitated driver from seeing their actions. They reached for a cigarette, sparking it with a calm, deliberate manner while maintaining unwavering eye contact with the frantic driver. The tiny flame of the lighter and the subsequent glowing ember of the cigarette provided a visual cue that the narrator was in no hurry and was relishing the situation. In the compact car, the driver was realizing that their temper tantrum wasn't going to make the narrator yield. Defeated and seething, the compact car driver eventually gave in, shifted into reverse, and retreated behind the moving truck, where they should have stayed in the first place. The narrator, content with their small victory, shifted their truck back into drive and continued on their way, their darkly tinted side windows concealing any smug satisfaction they may have been feeling. As they drove off, the narrator couldn't help but imagine the bewildered expression on the defeated driver's face, who had just been served an unexpected lesson in the importance of obeying traffic laws, however petty it may have been. 16 years ago, I resided in the bustling greater Los Angeles area, where parking was a precious commodity. Fast forward to today, I can only imagine it's become even more challenging. In a city where parking spots are almost like gold dust, residents often find themselves maneuvering around double-parked moving trucks, hoping for a stroke of luck. The law permitted a clever workaround for this peculiar urban woe, where drivers could pass these behemoth trucks if their front end encroached onto the opposite lane, provided the road was clear. It was on one such day that the gears of this story began to turn. I was cruising down a familiar street when I spotted a moving truck conveniently parked in the opposing lane. This wasn't an issue, my travel plans remained unaffected. That was until a compact car decided to bypass the mammoth truck by venturing into my lane, heading straight towards me. Naturally, I could have stopped abruptly, granting the compact car ample space to overtake. However, there's a side of me that delights in adhering to the letter of the law, especially when it's on my side. So, I decided to bring my vehicle to a halt only when my truck's nose was nearly level with the front of the gargantuan truck. Of course, this is a residential street with a 25 miles per hour speed limit, and neither of us was exceeding that. The driver of the compact car began a cacophony of angry horn honking, gesturing vehemently and shaking his fists in a fit of rage. My headlights, however, were aimed directly into his cab, affording me a front-row view of his temper tantrum. There I sat, unmoving, unreactive, save for the moment when I reached up and casually shifted my truck into park. The fact that my vehicle's cabin wasn't sufficiently illuminated to show my nonchalance didn't deter me. I reveled in this mini showdown. The irate compact car operator eventually grasped the futility of his plight. I wasn't going to yield to his demands. Grudgingly, he shifted into reverse, returning to the spot behind the moving truck where he should have remained in the first place. With the compact car safely in its place, I slipped my truck into drive and continued on my way. This episode left me feeling rather satisfied. As the driver of the compact car retreated in my rearview mirror, I allowed a subtle grin to form on my face. I've never spoken about this encounter until now, a decade and a half later. but the sense of petty triumph that it awarded me lingers as a fond memory.
In 2017, I embarked on a part-time warehouse gig, never suspecting it would lead to a turbulent tale of workplace drama. Over time, I climbed the ranks, transitioning into a transport admin/management role alongside a trusted colleague. Our dynamic duo thrived, with our line manager offering minimal interference and maximum trust. But, as life often unfurls, change was on the horizon. In 2021, the corporate winds shifted, our manager reassigned, and a new leader emerged solely to oversee our team. At first, we harbored bitterness about the change, yet we remained open to giving the new manager a chance. Little did we know that this decision would usher in an era of turmoil. This fresh manager was a peculiar blend of support and manipulation. His actions were unpredictable, frequently veering between friendly jests and bullying tactics. He seemed fixated on my past car accident, making it a recurring target for mockery. He had an affinity for assigning me the least desirable tasks while sowing discord among my colleagues. Then, in March of that year, my world was upended when my girlfriend fell seriously ill during her pregnancy, leading to the premature birth of our son. It was a traumatic ordeal, and I was compelled to take 3 weeks off work to navigate the crisis. Upon my return, a towering workload awaited, neglected during my absence. As I grappled to catch up, my manager frequently yanked me away to assist with his pet projects. And when deadlines inevitably slipped, he was quick to chastise me, questioning my time management skills. By May, my manager committed a grave error and sought to shift blame onto my shoulders. This incident strained my relationships with colleagues, leading to threats of disciplinary action. It was the last straw. I realized that without my expertise, my manager was powerless. He owed his job to my operational prowess. He basked in the glory while we toiled in the trenches. With this realization, I decided to take matters into my own hands. In June, I handed in my resignation, which would be a turning point in this workplace drama. Over the next 4 weeks, I witnessed my manager attempting to take over my responsibilities, slowly realizing the complexity of the job he had so often dismissed. As I made my exit in June, I made a bold prediction to my colleagues: within 3 months, our manager would either quit or be fired. And remarkably, my prophecy came true. Within weeks, the department faltered during its monthly audit, attracting the attention of company directors. A month later, I was on vacation when my ex-manager's inadequacies became glaringly evident, leading senior managers to reach out to me for passwords and help. The errors piled up, and it was increasingly clear that he was out of his depth. Just a month after my departure, the manager was suspended pending an investigation, as the company's leadership finally grasped the extent of his incompetence. A month later, the inevitable arrived. Management claimed he had left with immediate effect. Whether he quit or was fired is up for debate, but the one thing I knew for sure was that he was unable to steer the ship without me. My petty revenge turned out to be remarkably accurate. I had made a point and validated it, with our manager's departure reinforcing the extent of my contribution. Good riddance. Now, I've embarked on a new journey, running my own business with an improved work-life balance, a far superior income, and an overall fantastic life. Sometimes, petty revenge turns out to be the most satisfying kind.
A few months ago, I started a new job as a customer service representative at ABC Company, and things seemed pretty normal until I met my colleague, who I'll affectionately refer to as Karen. Karen, despite being at the same job level, had a knack for acting like she was my boss. She'd micromanage me relentlessly, inventing bizarre rules that I was expected to follow, and generally making my workdays a nightmare. Frustrated, I finally confronted her about her behavior, which led to a heated argument. Inevitably, Karen ran to our manager to complain about our altercation. Although our manager feigned impartiality, I could sense they were leaning towards Karen's side. After this incident, Karen's behavior took a nasty turn. She'd frequently throw shade, employ passive-aggressive tactics, and offload her work onto me. It was evident she was determined to make my work life as miserable as possible, confident that her friends and the manager would always back her. Then, one day, Karen orchestrated yet another dramatic conflict, and, predictably, the manager sided with her. I had reached my breaking point and quit my job on the spot. For 2 weeks after quitting, I couldn't let go of the anger and frustration Karen had caused. I decided it was time for some sweet revenge. In my area, recruiters and HR professionals frequently contact potential job candidates via WhatsApp. I noticed that Karen had updated her LinkedIn profile to signal that she was open to new job opportunities. Armed with her phone number, I decided to pose as a recruiter, using a secondary phone number for this elaborate scheme. I reached out to Karen, pretending to represent a fictional company seeking a customer service rep. I crafted a fake job description similar to her previous role but with superior pay and benefits to pique her interest. When she expressed her desire to apply, I sent her a fabricated job application form and concocted customer service writing tests to make the ruse convincing. This gave me access to more personal information about Karen, which I could potentially use later. I then scheduled an online interview with her for the day after tomorrow. On the day of the interview, about an hour before the scheduled time, I sent Karen a message, claiming that our background check had revealed her involvement in workplace harassment and bullying. Consequently, we were no longer considering her for the position. She responded in bewilderment, asking for clarification, but I maintained radio silence. Frustrated and fuming, she threatened to check with them, but I continued to ignore her, knowing that silence was the most effective way to infuriate someone like her. Whether she inquired about the background check from her current employer or not, I saw it as a win. If she did, it would create an awkward situation with her manager, potentially jeopardizing her current job. If she didn't, she'd be left embarrassed, knowing that someone out there was aware of her toxic behavior and she had no means to defend herself. At first, I contemplated taking the revenge further by conducting a fake interview, offering her the fictional job, and then rescinding the offer post-background check. But the risks and complications were too great, so I settled for this small victory, content with the satisfaction of catching her off guard with a fake background check.
A few months ago, I started a new job as a customer service representative at a company known as ABC Company. Everything was going smoothly until I met my colleague, Karen. Despite both of us being at the same job level, Karen had this uncanny belief that she was my boss, constantly micromanaging me with her arbitrary rules and making my workdays unbearable. One fateful day, I reached my breaking point and decided to confront Karen about her overbearing behavior. She, however, didn't take kindly to this and immediately ran to our manager, filing a complaint about me. When our manager intervened to resolve the issue, I could sense a bias towards Karen, even though they tried to maintain a facade of impartiality. After that incident, Karen's hostility towards me escalated. She began engaging in passive-aggressive behavior, throwing subtle shade, and even offloading her workload onto me. It felt like a never-ending cycle of annoyance, and I was determined to escape it. Then, a turning point came in May when Karen deliberately manufactured another conflict. This time, the manager once again sided with her, and I couldn't take it any longer. In a fit of frustration, I quit my job right there on the spot. For 2 weeks, I simmered with anger over how Karen had ruined my job. I contemplated some form of retaliation, and that's when inspiration struck. In my area, recruiters and HR personnel often reached out to potential job candidates through WhatsApp. I happened to have Karen's phone number, and I knew her LinkedIn profile indicated she was open to new job opportunities. I decided to impersonate a recruiter using a secondary phone number I had. I messaged Karen under this false identity, informing her of a fictional customer service representative position at a fictitious company that boasted slightly better compensation and benefits. She expressed interest, and I proceeded to send her a fictitious job application form and a set of customer service writing tests to make the ruse more believable. I then arranged an online interview with her for the day after tomorrow. This is where it got interesting. On the day of the interview, I texted her an hour before the scheduled time, stating that a background check had revealed her involvement in workplace bullying and harassment. As a result, I informed her that the company would not be pursuing her application. Naturally, Karen was baffled and sent a string of messages expressing disbelief. I remained silent, fully aware that engaging in conversation with her would only fan the flames. She threatened to contact the supposed company for an explanation, but I chose to continue ignoring her. The more she vented, the more she was denied a channel for confrontation, which only heightened her frustration. But it didn't stop there. To take my small victory a step further, I had initially contemplated conducting a fake interview and offering her the non-existent job. My plan was to make her resign from her current job and then reveal the offer's rescission due to the fabricated background check. However, it was logistically challenging to find someone else to interview her without her recognizing my voice, and I worried about potential legal repercussions. So, instead, I reveled in my small triumph, a successful subterfuge that left her utterly flabbergasted. I could only imagine her frustration and confusion, and that brought me a sense of vindication. In the end, while it might not be the grandest revenge story, it was a satisfactory way to demonstrate that Karen's bullying wouldn't go unpunished.
At 28 years old, I found myself residing in a small town where job opportunities were scarce. In light of the limited prospects, I made the decision to move back in with my parents, a choice facilitated by our close-knit and supportive family dynamic. To contribute my fair share, I took on the responsibility of purchasing groceries and covering a portion of the household bills, aligning with the harmonious relationship we had always shared. However, this arrangement did not sit well with my younger sister, who was just 16 at the time. She harbored a strong opinion that I should be out on my own once more, taking strides toward independence. In her eyes, my presence at home was nothing short of a freeloading existence, and she made sure to vocalize her disapproval. Her relentless name-calling painted me as a parasitic leech, a label that stung with each repetition. Our parents held an unusual stance when it came to technology. They were not affiliated with any religious cult or extremist group. Rather, they simply chose to live a simplistic life that largely excluded modern tech marvels. The extent of their tech repertoire consisted of a laundry machine, a trusty family car, a humble flip phone, and an unassuming television set. However, to their credit, they never deprived us of our gadgets if we had purchased them ourselves. I remembered the challenging path I had tread when I turned 18, eagerly seeking my first job. In a household devoid of computers and printers, I painstakingly crafted my resume by hand. The dearth of part-time opportunities in our town, particularly for high school students, had rendered it nearly impossible to secure employment. In stark contrast to my own journey, my little sister had been blessed with good fortune. I had bought her a PC, a smartphone, and even arranged for a data mobile plan when she was just a child. Despite this, She had taken to calling me a parasitic leech with unwavering fervor, a constant reminder of my perceived shortcomings. As her relentless taunts began to wear on my patience, I decided it was time to take action. I took a step that might be seen as drastic but was a clear message in my eyes. I canceled her data plan and, quite literally, repossessed all the gadgets that had been my generosity. It was a decision rooted in the desire to teach her a valuable lesson. Now, my little sister found herself thrust into a world she had never truly known, an environment that mirrored the very childhood I had experienced. The absence of modern technology became her new reality, and she was left to navigate a landscape devoid of the digital luxuries she had grown so accustomed to. The sudden shift was a stark contrast to the comfort and convenience she had taken for granted. In those initial days of her digital detox, she grappled with the realization that her smartphone, once a constant companion, now lay dormant. Her PC, which had been her portal to the virtual world, sat idle, collecting dust. The absence of a data plan left her unable to connect to the online realm that had come to define her daily life. Her world had been reduced to the simplicity of handwritten notes, paperback books, and face-to-face conversations, a stark departure from the instant gratification of modern tech. Somewhere along the way, a profound transformation began to take shape within her. The ceaseless name-calling and judgments had been silenced by the newfound tranquility of our Amish-like existence. As the days turned into weeks, she developed a newfound appreciation for the uncomplicated, uncluttered lifestyle that our family had always cherished. Yet, as I watched her journey unfold, I couldn't help but notice the poignancy of her metamorphosis. It was a poetic twist in her fate, one that she had brought upon herself through her relentless criticisms. The lessons learned were ones of humility and the recognition that casting judgment on family members could be hurtful and unjust. As time passed, a sense of regret began to shadow her once unwavering resolve. She realized that her thoughtless words had triggered this unexpected journey into simplicity, and her initial disdain for the lifestyle she now led had given way to a deep appreciation. Yet, it was a lesson learned too late to reverse the course she had set in motion. In the end, her own journey had brought her full circle, serving as a stark reminder that the paths we walk in life are never truly predictable. The digital world she had once embraced with open arms had given way to a newfound understanding of the value of simplicity and the importance of treating family with kindness and respect.
When I embarked on my journey to university, my parents generously co-signed a mortgage for a cozy apartment-style condominium in a quaint Canadian town 2 decades ago. The cost of this abode was a staggering $52,000 at the time. They believed it was a more sensible and economical choice than navigating the world of apartments and landlords. I enthusiastically embraced the idea and settled into my new home. The building predominantly housed individuals aged 65 and older. It was a modest structure with just 24 units, divided into 2 sections. My unit was nestled in the basement. While it wasn't extravagant, it was perfect for a student like me. At the tender age of 19, I maintained a low profile, kept to myself, and avoided the typical college party scene. I fostered amicable relationships with most of my neighbors, often lending a hand with heavy lifting or helping them transport groceries upstairs. Given the significant age gap and the stereotypical image of a college student, I made it a point to be a considerate and helpful neighbor to steer clear of conflicts. However, one neighbor proved to be a perpetual thorn in my side, my upstairs neighbor. Despite being a petite 70-year-old woman who couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, she moved about like an elephant. She blared gospel music at maximum volume at 5 a.m. on Sundays, frequently grumbled about that damn kid if anything was out of place, and even accused me of breaking into her car, resulting in a police statement. However, I was out of the country on an internship during that time, making her claims baseless. Nevertheless, she persisted in making my life miserable. I attempted to address the issue with her regarding the loud TV, only to receive the retort that it would no longer be confined to Sundays. After several years of diplomacy, it became evident that there was no resolution in sight. While others in the building likely knew she had a vendetta against me, it was baffling why this sweet-looking elderly lady would fabricate stories and attempt to have me expelled from the condominium association board, which she did at least 11 times during my residency. 7 years into my stay, while I was working for an ambulance service just north of the city, I received a call about a shooting, neighbors embroiled in a land dispute. Although the victim survived, a police investigation was inevitable. The investigating officers contacted me for a statement and offered to come to my residence for the interview, given that one of them was a constable I had worked with extensively. I agreed and set a time for an hour after my return from work. As I was stepping out of the shower, I heard them buzz to enter the building. I quickly called out, "Come in, I'll be out in a second." I hastily grabbed some clothes and heard them ascend the stairs. While I was trying to get dressed, I heard them knock on my upstairs neighbor's door. They introduced themselves as members of the RCMP Major Crimes Division, inquiring about my whereabouts. Panic set in as she replied, "Oh, he lives downstairs. What do you want with him?" They thanked her for the information and, not divulging any details due to the ongoing investigation, left. My heart sank, but then a plan began to form. I knew the gossip mill would soon churn out tales. She would likely tell anyone who would listen that the Major Crimes Division was seeking me, painting me as a criminal. I decided to see how far this would go. Soon, I noticed neighbors giving me sidelong glances in the hallway, while others avoided me. It became apparent that she had been spreading stories. According to her, I had been arrested for robbery and kidnapping and was out on bail. The revelation came when a neighbor who served on the condo board delivered a letter demanding an explanation, coupled with threats of eviction. Per the condo board's bylaws, I could request a meeting to provide a defense before any action was taken. Linda, not her real name, my upstairs neighbor, was also a member of the board. They scheduled the meeting for a week later, but I was forewarned that the odds were stacked against me. On the day of the meeting, Linda sat smirking at me, while other board members cast disapproving glances my way. The board president asked for my defense. I stood and quietly handed out a letter on RCMP letterhead, signed by the regional superintendent. The letter read, "Mr. Zenmedic is not under suspicion of any crimes, past or current, and has not been arrested, detained, or questioned as a suspect in any criminal matter. His duties as a paramedic may require him to make statements regarding ongoing investigations, and on this particular date, investigators sought his statement in connection with an ongoing investigation in which he was professionally involved. At no point did the investigators discuss, reveal, or suggest his involvement in any wrongdoing. I regret the necessity of this letter and will reopen an inquiry into a previous incident concerning false allegations against him." The shift in facial expressions was palpable. The accusatory glares turned from me to Linda. She gasped that the letter must be a forgery and insisted she had witnessed my arrest. She pleaded with the board to believe her, but it did not sway their decision. I rose to address the board and recounted years of harassment and abuse, including her false accusation of vehicle break-ins. I also informed the board that, as advised by my lawyer, I would not discuss the matter further with any board member due to Linda's involvement and her use of her position for harassment, which opened the board as a whole to potential legal action. The next day, there was a knock on my door. The board president informed me that Linda had been removed from the board and cautioned about her behavior. Any further harassment could result in eviction proceedings against her. Linda also received a visit from the police, who issued her a summons for providing false statements and obstructing a peace officer. She had to appear in court, where she pled guilty to both charges. She received a suspended sentence and a 1-year condition not to harass, threaten, or intentionally inconvenience me in any manner. If she adhered to these conditions, she would receive an absolute discharge, effectively erasing the incident from her record. I relocated to another province before her year of probation was up, but for a brief period, I enjoyed peaceful Sunday mornings, free from harassment.
years ago, during my college days, I found myself working at the cozy little coffee shop in my hometown. The place was a hub of warmth and comfort, a favorite haunt for the locals seeking refuge from the hustle and bustle of their lives. The setting was perfect, and for the first year, my experience there was nothing short of idyllic. I shared my shifts with a delightful couple in their 30s, let's call them Alex, A, and Bella, B. They radiated warmth and camaraderie, making each day a pleasant experience. The shop buzzed with contentment, and customers were greeted with smiles and freshly brewed coffee, creating an atmosphere that felt like home. However, a single fateful night marked the turning point in this tale. I was scheduled for a closing shift with Alex, but I had been feeling under the weather all day. As nightfall loomed, my condition worsened, with a high fever that made it nearly impossible to stand. The impending rain only added to my misery. With just 30 minutes remaining until closing time, I mustered the courage to approach Alex and asked if I could leave early. To my relief, he agreed, and I departed, hoping to find some much-needed rest. The following morning, as I returned to the shop, I was greeted by Alex and Bella with mock enthusiasm. "Look who's here, mister, I have a fever and can barely stand." I tried to brush it off as a light-hearted jest, but the banter didn't stop there. Throughout the day, their playful taunts continued, gradually turning more malicious. A more significant blow came when, the next day, Alex stopped communicating with me altogether. This silence began to affect our workflow as he refused to relay orders or provide any assistance. It reached a point where I had to approach customers for their orders when Alex took them and handle everything myself when I was at the counter. He even feigned deafness when I attempted to communicate or ask for help. Days turned into weeks, and the frosty silence persisted. It was clear that Alex was unwilling to engage in any form of mature conversation. Frustration mounting, I finally turned to the shop's owner, hoping for a solution. To my dismay, the owner's response was far from what I had hoped for. He nonchalantly remarked, "You'll have to work harder to earn his approval," with his wife echoing, "That's just the way he is." My patience was running thin, and I knew that the couple was about to embark on a 2-week vacation following their recent wedding. That's when the idea for a bit of petty revenge began to take shape in my mind. I proposed to the owner that I would manage the shop's opening and closing shifts alone, something I had done countless times before. I spun it as my way of putting in extra effort to earn Alex's elusive approval. Surprisingly, the owner agreed without hesitation. The fateful week of their much-anticipated holiday arrived, but on the morning of the first day, I never showed up to open the shop. Panic ensued in our group chat, as they desperately tried to reach me and find a last-minute replacement, but my phone remained silent. A few tense hours later, the owner delivered the news: their vacation was cut short, and they had to return to work prematurely. The realization of their own medicine seemed to finally dawn upon them, as the consequences of their actions mirrored back at them in a most unexpected twist. In the late 1990s, I found myself working for a company specializing in building and distributing computers in bulk to large businesses. This remarkable tale unfolds within the confines of a company that originally hailed from China but had expanded its operations to Milpitas, California. The company, which we'll affectionately refer to as Dupercom, boasted satellite offices scattered across the United States. My role was that of the lead technician and computer assembler, stationed at one of their South Texas branches. With a team of roughly 20 individuals, our operation was relatively small yet tightly knit. The front of the building housed bustling sales offices, while the cavernous warehouse in the rear brimmed with computer components of every kind. Our story's antagonist, who couldn't have been more fittingly named Susanna, reigned as our office manager. Susanna embodied the archetypal Karen figure, a petty tyrant who aspired to dominate our workplace with an iron fist. Her demeanor was nothing short of acrimonious, an emotional landscape mirroring that of a self-absorbed, jealous middle schooler. She derived great pleasure from exerting control over others, and her presence was a source of collective disdain among our office's denizens. One illustrative instance of Susanna's pettiness occurred when her secretary requested the construction of a new computer for her home. The very next day, Susanna waltzed into our tech department, demanding information on the computer we had built for her subordinate. Her motivation? To order a more powerful one for herself, rationalizing that it was unacceptable for her underling to possess superior computing power. This audacious act of comparison was just one of many examples showcasing Susanna's immaturity. We, however, refused to disclose such information due to customer privacy regulations. Undeterred, Susanna clandestinely accessed the invoices herself, leveraging her privileged access rights. Subsequently, she insisted that we craft a superior machine for her, complete with a better processor, more memory, and a larger hard drive. What's more, she appropriated the computer for her personal use and charged it to the company, bypassing any semblance of personal responsibility. A second episode of her pettiness involved me personally. As the manager of the tech department, my responsibilities included attending presentations by hardware vendors who hoped to secure bulk contracts with us. They knew that if we chose their products, orders would come pouring in by the thousands. On the day these vendors were set to present their products, Susanna abruptly ordered me to assist the warehouse manager with stock duties, a clear violation of my duty to attend the presentation. I stood my ground, informing her that my presence was imperative at the meeting. Unfazed, she demanded, right in front of the entire office and the vendors themselves, that I comply and work in the warehouse like an assistant. I declined, leading to a heated confrontation in which she aimed to assert her dominance by belittling me. In a surprising turn of events, I calmly exited the room, grabbed the phone, and contacted the regional manager, putting him on speakerphone. He unequivocally declared that I must attend the presentation, defusing the situation but leaving Susanna fuming. Nonetheless, she persisted in her efforts to undermine me and Robert, the sales manager. She stooped to absurd lengths, such as turning on computer monitors in the tech room after my departure, then berating me the following day for forgetting to turn them off and wasting electricity. She even resorted to falsifying sales reports to tarnish Robert and his team's reputation, causing misery for everyone in the office. In response to Susanna's tyranny, the office collectively devised a plan for revenge. We had observed her tendency to sweep missing inventory items under the rug during quarterly warehouse inventory reports. Rather than investigating, she habitually zeroed out these discrepancies in the system, eliminating any trace of missing items to protect her performance metrics. About a week before the next quarterly inventory report, we discreetly concealed 2 crates, equating to 60 units, of video cards. As expected, Susanna zeroed out these missing units, blissfully ignorant of the impending reckoning. The warehouse manager, wise to her actions, printed 2 sets of inventory reports, one of which he kept for himself. He then presented the reports to Susanna before contacting the regional manager to express concerns over missing inventory items. True to form, Susanna zeroed out the missing units and presented the sanitized reports to the regional manager, feigning competence. However, this time, the warehouse manager revealed the authentic reports to the regional manager privately, exposing Susanna's dubious activities. In the end, Susanna's fate was sealed within minutes of the revelation. The regional manager promptly terminated her employment. The entire office watched in euphoric silence as Susanna packed her belongings and embarked on the walk of shame to her car. As she exited through the office doors, her disgrace was met with a resounding cheer from the staff, a celebratory chorus that reached her ears despite the glass separating her from the jubilation. Tears of embarrassment and fury streamed down her face as she absorbed the unanimous verdict of her co-workers. Helen, Susanna's kind-hearted assistant, ascended to the position of office manager, bringing an era of greater harmony and productivity to the workplace.